Sure you guys don't want a bigger room?
We love you. We love you. We like being close.
Okay, good. As you know, we've had a tremendous amount of activity here in the last 24 hours, really focused on the American worker. Buy America and Hire America is at the core of the president's plan to create an economy that works for everyone. And I think by every indication, you've seen that focus in the past 24 and 36 hours. Before we begin going through the events of today, I want to start off with a quick rundown of all that the president and his administration have done with just one official working day under our belts. I don't know about everyone else, but I think it's been a pretty impressive first and second full days here. President Trump's meetings yesterday with top business and union leaders, including frontline union workers, went very well, and I think was a signal to every American worker that jobs and the economy are truly the president's top priority. A few of the participants noted afterwards in each one of these groups that we meet with that this was the first time, in some cases ever, that they've been reached out to. In almost every case, the first time they were invited into the Oval Office. And I really think that when you look at the level of concern and interest that he has in the American worker, it's been clearly on display in the last 24, 36 hours. In addition to these productive meetings, the president also took major steps towards fulfilling some of his biggest campaign promises to the American people. He ushered in a new era of U.S. trade policy by withdrawing from the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement and restored respect for taxpayers by instituting a hiring freeze on the executive branch. He also reaffirmed his commitment to life by reestablishing the Mexico City policy. And the president ended his day yesterday with a bipartisan, bicameral meeting of congressional leaders where he made it clear that he expects there to be no delay in getting an agenda through Congress and action out of Washington. This morning, the president began his day with a breakfast listening to key automobile executives. They spoke about the importance of increasing manufacturing capabilities specific to the automotive industry. They touched on the need for regulatory reform and a modernized safety standards, which will advance the industry leading in technology and job creation here in the United States. I think you've been briefed on the attendees, but real quickly, Mary Barra is the head of General Motors, was here. Former Governor Matt Blunt, the president of the American Automotive Policy Council, Mark Fields of Ford, Craig Gilden of General Motors, Roger Carr of Fiat Chrysler, Sergio Marchionne of Fiat Chrysler, Zio Jockey, the head of government affairs for Ford, and then from the administration, Jared Kushner was on hand, Reince Priebus, Steve Bannon, Stephen Miller, Gary Cohn, and Hope Hicks. Then the president signed a series of executive actions that will move our country towards energy independence, but more importantly, really continue to get Americans back to work. The president started by signing a memorandum to fulfilling a major promise to secure swift approval for the Keystone Pipeline. The memorandum invites TransCanada to resubmit their proposal and directs agencies to approve it without delay. There's an energy revolution that's going to happen in this country, and in spite of the bureaucratic and political barriers that have been in place in the past, we're ready to move forward. Oil and gas production is up significantly in the last decade, and our imports have been cut in half. The president's actions today will create tens of thousands of new jobs for the American workers and move us greater towards energy independence, while at the same time ensuring that we keep the environment as a top priority. The president also signed a memorandum regarding the Dakota Access Pipeline. This memorandum directs agencies to expedite reviews and approvals for the remaining portions of this pipeline, which the previous administration held up for political reasons. The $3.8 billion pipeline, already almost 90% complete, will carry over 500,000 barrels a day of crude oil from areas in North Dakota to oil markets in the U.S. And in both of these areas, as the president remarked this morning, he's going to ensure that we continue to negotiate in both areas to provide the best deal for the American taxpayer. The president signed an executive order establishing a framework for expediting environmental reviews for high-priority infrastructure projects. Delays and other inefficiencies in the environmental review and permitting process are severely impeding critically important projects that will help us remodernize and rebuild our nation's infrastructure. This order will help put an end to the crippling delays caused by bureaucratic red tape. The president also signed a memorandum requiring the Commerce Secretary to submit a report recommending how best to streamline manufacturing permitting. The president has been hearing from manufacturers that excessive regulation are driving them out of the U.S. As part of his commitment to making America work again, the President has directed the Commerce Secretary to reach out to manufacturers and the public to identify regulations that are hurting them from moving forward. The President also signed a memorandum directing the Commerce Secretary to lead a study looking into building the Keystone and Dakota Access pipelines, as well as any other future pipeline with U.S.-made steel and pipe and accessories. This is the first step in the President really delivering on his campaign promise to put American steel back at the backbone of the U.S. economy. The U.S. has lost nearly 1/3 of its manufacturing base since 1997, even though the country's population has increased by 50 million people. We're going to rebuild our infrastructure, and we're going to do it with American workers and with American resources. As many of you recall, the Buy American theme was a major part of the President's inaugural address. This is clearly an immediate action and an extension of that promise that he made to the American people last Friday. We sorely need these infrastructure jobs. According to the National Association of Manufacturers, without improvements to our transportation systems, quote, the United States will lose more than 2.5 million jobs by 2025. Creating jobs and boosting wages is the President's top priority, and has been made very clear over the past 36 hours. This is an area where he's taking immediate action. At 1 o'clock, President was speaking with Indian Prime Minister Modi. We'll have a readout as soon as that's available. If we can get it to you during the briefing, we will. This afternoon, the President will hold a bipartisan meeting with key Senate leadership, including the Majority Leader, the Minority Leader, the Majority Whip, and the Minority Whip, to discuss his nomination for Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. As he noted earlier today, he intends to have a decision by the end of the week and an announcement early next week. The President has made it incredibly clear that he will appoint justices who protect our liberty and hold the highest regards for the Constitution. He continues to carefully consider potential future justices based on their commitment to upholding these principles. This meeting is an important opportunity for the President to consult with Senate leaders from both sides of the aisle on his potential choices for the bench. As you may have heard, Speaker Ryan extended an invitation to the President to address a joint session of Congress on February 28th. I'm pleased to inform you that the President has accepted that invitation, and he looks forward to sharing his plans for moving the country forward. I have a feeling by the time we get to February 28th, we will have a lot to talk about. It was great to see the nominations of Dr. Carson, Secretary Chow, Mr. Ross, and Governor Haley were advanced out of committee today. Just as a reminder, by the end of the first week of President Obama's first week in office, he had 12. So the Senate's got a little catching up to do, and I hope the Senate Democrats do their job and help us catch up to that number. One quick follow-up on our storm relief efforts that have plagued the Southeast. White House staff is in touch with officials in the states and will continue to provide assistance to the recovery. A FEMA team is on the ground in Atlanta, Georgia to support response and recovery activities. FEMA liaison officers have been deployed to emergency support centers in both Mississippi and Georgia for response activities. With that, I'd be glad to take a few questions. Jim Stinson, LifeSet.
Today, immigration enforcement organizations and activists expressed concern that they haven't seen immediate action on DACA and DAPA. I was just wondering, that was a key campaign pledge of President Trump on the campaign trail. When can people expect action on that? It wouldn't require, it would only require stopping, renewing the applications. It wouldn't actually be retroactive against anyone. So what's the holdup?
Well, as I think I mentioned yesterday, I think when it comes to immigration and the promises that the President made during the campaign to both ensure that we build a wall and enforce our southern border, as well as reform our entire immigration system, his priority is first and foremost focused on people who pose a threat to people in our country, to criminals, frankly. And that's where he wants ICE to focus their efforts. With respect to DACA, I think he's considering to make sure that his cabinet level team starts to organize and create a plan to move forward with respect to that issue, and that's where we are right now. David Jackson.
Sean, there are stories out there that the EPA officials have been gagged from talking to the press, talking to the media. Basically, it's the gag order. It's the same kind of thing we had from the Interior Department over the weekend. First of all, is that true? And secondly, why is that being done if it is?
Yeah, I don't know. That story literally is breaking as we were entering the briefing room. We're looking into it. I don't think it's any surprise that when there's an administration turnover that we're going to review the policies. But with respect to the question you're asking, I don't have any information at this time. We asked the team to go look into it as we're entering the briefing room, and if I have an update while we're here, I'll be glad to get back to you.
The Interior Department, did they have the same kind of thing over the weekend? Supposedly they were banned from Twitter?
I read that. My understanding is that because they had inappropriately violated their own social media policies, there was guidance that was put out to the department to act in compliance with the rules that were set forth. Steve Holland.
Ron, in signing the orders on Keystone and Dakota Access this morning, he said he would like to renegotiate some of the terms. What exactly was he talking about there?
That's a great question, Steve. I think one of the things that the American people clearly know about Donald Trump is he's a successful businessman and a successful negotiator. And as he looks at these deals, what he's trying to ensure is that these projects that are great in the sense they're going to create jobs and help our economy, but in a lot of cases they're going to make these organizations a lot of money. And what he's ensuring is that the American taxpayer gets the best deal possible. So he's asking his team to review those deals and to make sure that if we're going to do all of these things to expedite these projects that go over or under a piece of U.S. soil, that the American taxpayer is considered in this process, and that we get the best deal for our country, not just in terms of jobs and future economic growth and a little bit more energy security, but also in terms of making sure that the taxpayers writ large who own some of these lands or access to these lands in waters and rivers, in case of Dakota, or get the best deal possible. Charlie Sparing.
As you know, the March for Life is on Friday, and the President George W. Bush had a tradition of addressing the marchers through a phone call on the mall. Will the President be continuing that tradition on Friday?
I know Kellyanne is going to attend the event. I think we're still working through details, but we'll have further for you on the President's potential participation in that. I think it's no secret the President has campaigned as a pro-life president. It's something that is very important to him, as evidenced by the Mexico City policy reinstatement that he issued yesterday. Obviously, we're going to have heavy administration presence there. It's no secret that this administration and this president are going to do what they can to fight for life. With the exact participation level of the president, we'll find out whether it's a greeting of some sort or a call. I'll have a further update for you. Cecilia?
Sean, does the president believe that millions voted illegally in this election, and what evidence do you have of widespread voter fraud in this election, if that's the case?
The president does believe that. He has stated that before. I think he stated his concerns of voter fraud and people voting illegally during the campaign, and he continues to maintain that belief based on studies and evidence that people have presented to him.
Exactly what evidence?
I-
Well,
I-
Speaker
I'll-
Ryan today said there's no evidence. The National Association of Secretaries of State say that they don't agree with the president's assessment. What evidence do you have?
As I said, I think the president has believed that for a while based on studies and information he has. John Roberts.
In the waning hours of the Obama administration, they quietly transferred a lot of money out of the country, including $221 million to the Palestinian Authority. Is the president okay with that transfer? And if he is not, would he seek to claw back some of that money?
Well, I think when it comes to how U.S. taxpayer money is spent in general, whether it's overseas or here at home, you've seen through the hiring freeze and other actions that he's going to take. I just mentioned to Steve, he is very concerned about how taxpayer money is spent, whether it's sent overseas and what we get for it in terms of the relationship or our support for our democracy or aid to another country for their defenses. But he's going to be examining all aspects of the budget and how we look at all money, because I think that there is a newfound respect for how the American people's tax dollars are spent in this administration. And I think with his background as it is as a businessman and one who scrutinizes projects to bring them under budget on time, he's bringing that business acumen to the White House to the benefit of the American taxpayer.
Is he okay with that particular
I
transfer?
don't think I want to go any further to say that he is going to make sure that every deal, every dollar that is spent on behalf of by the government is done in a way that respects the American taxpayer.
Sean, when you were talking about that voter fraud, are you going to ask for an investigation? Is the White House going to formally ask for a probe into this alleged
No, I think
voter
he
fraud?
won very, very handily with 306 electoral votes, 33 states. He's very comfortable with his win, but I think
Trouble him if he's bringing it up. That's why
I think
I'm
he was
asking.
having a discussion with some folks and mentioned something in passing, which has been a long-standing belief that he's maintained. This isn't the first time that you've heard this concern of his. Trey?
No, but I
Thanks,
think it's
Sean.
worth clarifying whether illegal ballots or illegal
And
immigrants
I think there's been
are
studies.
being
There was one
characterized.
that came out of Pew in 2008 that showed 14% of people who have voted were non-citizens. There's other studies that have been presented to him. It's a belief he maintains. I mean,
Is counted improperly, as Dick Durbin says the president personally told him last night. It was that the people who
I
voted
think I
did so
I
illegally.
have asked and answered it. It's a belief that he's maintained for a while, a concern that he has about voter fraud, and that's based on information that's provided. Trey.
Thanks, Sean. Following President Trump's executive actions earlier today, is he concerned about large-scale protests surrounding the construction of the Dakota Access and Keystone XL pipelines like we saw at Standing Rock? And how will he address the concerns of those who oppose those plans?
I think he is going to make sure that he is looking or working with all parties involved, and that's part of to Steve's question. There's a way that you can continue to negotiate that, whether it's the Native Americans' concerns that they have on some of the lands in the Dakota pipeline. I mean, you're 93% there with Dakota, and I think that the president has shown through his business life that he knows how to negotiate a great deal where parties come out ahead, and he is willing to sit down with all of the individuals that are involved in the Dakota pipeline to make sure that it's a deal that benefits all of the parties of interest, or at least gets them something that we want. So that's part of it. Margaret.
Say Mara or Margaret? No, Margaret.
All right, one at a time. Okay, Margaret, then Mara. We'll stick with the M's for a while.
I'd like to ask you about Jim Comey, but I also very quickly wanted to follow up on Steve Holland's question about the pipelines and the renegotiation. The president, I think, sort of suggested that some of those renegotiations might already be happening, or that they would start happening. And I'm just wondering if you can clarify, like, are the mechanisms for that set? Have those discussions already begun?
Well, he just signed the executive order today, and part of it was that as he moves these things forward, he wants to make sure that he gets the best deal for the American taxpayer and works with the parties involved to ensure that people who might have concerns have an opportunity to come back to the table and see if there's a way to.
The mechanisms are still being fleshed out, and the
Yes.
negotiations have not started again.
That's correct.
Jim Comey, what I wanted to ask was, could you make it official what has been reported by U.S. officials all day long, which is that the president has decided he wants Jim Comey to stay on, that Jim Comey has told him he will stay on. Did they discuss kind of the Russia investigations and the parameters of that?
I don't have anything for that. I don't know what the status is. I'll have to follow up with the president. Mara.
Okay, just a question about the hiring freeze yesterday. It doesn't exempt the VA, and there are 41,500 unfilled medical jobs at the VA, which is really an extremely large number.
Right.
The VA was one of his top
Right.
priorities, so he's
Remember,
now
it's a
hiring.
freeze, and part of it is to ensure hold on, but part of it is to get our VA secretary in there, and to figure out how we can best, because hiring people when you have a system that's not working, and then just going out and hiring additional people doesn't seem to be the most efficient way of solving the problem. What we need to do, whether it's the VA or any other agency, is make sure that we're hiring smartly and effectively and efficiently. And I think the VA in particular, if you look at the problems that have plagued people, hiring more people isn't the answer. It's hiring the right people, putting the procedures in place that ensure that our veterans, whether it's healthcare or mortgages or the other services that the VA provides to those who have served our nation, get the services that they've earned. And right now the system's broken. So the freeze is meant to pause, allow there to be an analysis of what can make this better. And it's not just the VA, although obviously that's high on the president's list, but it's making sure that all of the services of government are done in a way that A, respects the taxpayer, but gives the American people the service or benefit that they truly deserve. So.
Just to follow up on Cecilia,
Yeah.
if 3 to 5 million people voted illegally, that is a scandal of astronomical proportions. Doesn't he want to restore Americans' faith in their ballot system? Wouldn't he want an investigation of this?
Well,
mean,
again, this is
a
a,
huge
but Mara,
scandal.
as I've noted several times now, he's believed this for a long time, and I think he
believe it
won
all.
fairly overwhelmingly, so he's not. And look, we'll work.
I'm asking you, why not investigate something
Well,
that is
maybe we will.
the biggest scandal in American electoral history? 3 to 5 million people voting illegally?
I think we'll see where we go from here, but right now the focus that the president has is on putting Americans back to work. It was a comment that he made on a long-standing belief in the back. Yeah. Yes.
Mr. Trump's campaign, he talked a lot about banning Muslims from coming into the country and extreme vetting in his process. When can we expect him to take action on this?
I think that's going to be one of the things that he looks at his Department of State when Rex Tillerson gets confirmed, and some of the other departments in Homeland Security, and trying to put together a place that enacts this extreme vetting. But I think the interesting thing about the question that you're asking is that we're sitting here today with two confirmed with 3 cabinet with Mike Pompeo last night. But we're sitting here asking where the president's agenda is moving forward at a time when Senate Democrats are holding up, a massive amount of this cabinet.
Do you think they're doing it purposefully?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about it. When you let's walk back a second and remember that Chuck Schumer put out a statement saying that they had an issue with 8 or 9 of them. So that leaves about 12 of them, 13, that they didn't have a problem with. They were consensus candidates. And while I think every one of the people that the president has nominated to serve in his cabinet is unbelievably qualified, even the Democrats admitted that 12 to 13 of them were what they called consensus candidates and that they wouldn't oppose them. And yet here we are 2 days in. Hold on.
Do you have a message to those Democrats?
Let's get it done. I mean, our country's economy and safety is at stake. We have a continuity of government in place to ensure that we can continue to protect and preserve this country and move business forward. But the reason that you have a confirmed secretary or director or administrator is to make sure that you can enact the agenda that the president campaigned on. And I think that every minute that we stall is a moment that the Democrats should have to answer for. Yeah.
He's calling on you.
Okay, I'm Anthony Harper, the Intermountain Christian Newspaper and the Christian Newspaper Association. And Israel leaders in the Knesset, I'm aware of, are concerned about the misuse of U.S. tax dollars going to UN schools that are inciting kids to violence against the Jews. What do you think President Trump, how would he respond to these Israel leaders? They're MK leaders Sharon Haskell, Yehuda Glick, and Dr. Eliza Levy. I recently had interviews with them. Their concerns are very serious. So they would want to know what President Trump, or how he would respond to the misuse of these.
Well,
tax
I think I
dollars.
would go back to what I said to John a minute ago, which is that I think he has tremendous respect for how tax dollars are spent. But then I would mention again, I mean, we need a UN ambassador. We need a Secretary of State. There's a lot of these things that can start to happen under the direction of the new leadership that's being held up right now. Thank you. Tara.
Is the president open to the idea of choosing a mainstream candidate like some of the Democratic congressional leaders are urging him to do today?
For what?
For a Supreme Court nominee.
I think that defines. I think he's been very clear about his priorities. He's put out a list during the campaign of individuals that he would consider. But I mean, I think it's pretty mainstream to support the Constitution, pretty mainstream to respect, to follow the law, and not to create laws from the bench. That's what I think the majority of Americans would agree. And I think, when it comes to the candidates that he's put up for his cabinet, again, look at the quality and caliber of these individuals. That's what he's kind of continue to look for. People of high quality, of high caliber, that have gone, that fit the philosophy that he campaigned on. April.
I want to ask you a couple of questions. One, starting off with Sessions, this delay in a vote, primarily because of concerns about issues of civil rights with Sessions, as well as voting rights. Yesterday, you talked about issues of race, dealing with Congressman John Lewis and his statements, and also the bust. What do you say when people are once again bringing up the issue of race and voter fraud when it comes to Jeff Sessions, this man that President Trump has so much faith in to lead the Justice Department?
Well, I think Senator Sessions' record on voting and civil rights is exemplary. He has fought very hard as both an attorney general in Alabama, as a U.S. attorney, and then as a senator. For voting rights, for civil rights, on areas of minority rights, he has pushed forward. And so when you look at his entire record, the people he prosecuted as both a U.S. attorney and an Alabama attorney general, he's been very forceful when it comes to making sure that voting rights and civil rights are enforced and protected, and not just that, but advanced. When the Voting Rights Act came up for renewal, he was a huge champion of it. So it's not just his record as an attorney, but as a United States senator, he's been a very forceful advocate of the continuation of the Voting Rights Act. Yes, sir. Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yes. Okay. So I know we're new to this together. So. All right. So on the issue of race, going back, because you talked for a long time yesterday on the issue of race, and I wanted to ask you a couple of things, and I talked to the current head of the NAACP, who is accusing this administration of something called stereotyping by omission, saying that the president has met with athletes and entertainers, but yet has not met with civil rights leaders. And during his inauguration speech, he talked about inner cities, urban areas being riddled with gangs, violence, and drugs. What is the agenda? What are you planning when it comes to?
Well,
focus on this issue?
April, I mean, just the other day, he sat down with Martin Luther King Jr. I would call him a civil rights leader.
So where his dad was the civil
third.
rights leader.
Well,
You're talking about
I
three.
think that he has done, I mean, I think he has done a lot for that. There's a lot of the pastors that he's met with. He has met with a lot of individuals on that issue throughout the campaign. They've come up and down the tower. He's brought them in and out of during the campaign and during the transition. He's with Aveda King the other day during the prayer service. There's a ton of individuals that he's met with to talk about this issue, and I don't think it's something that he takes lightly. He's talked about it tremendously because it's important to him, both in terms of where this country moves forward and some of the issues that face some of the minority communities in terms of not just education, but jobs and hiring and healthcare and access to small business lending. Those are all areas that he's been very concerned with and that he's talked about the need to address.
Rollout of a plan. I mean,
We're on
some
day
of
two.
I know, but you
Guys,
made-
I know you're all anxious. I appreciate it.
100 days.
Huh?
He made this statement during the inauguration.
I understand it, and we're on day 2, and look what he's doing. But I think that when you look at the jobs programs, the Dakota Pipeline, the Keystone Pipeline, the things that are going to bring jobs back and good paying jobs with benefits, those benefit every American, regardless of the color of your skin. And I think that, he talked to the labor leaders today about apprenticeships and how we can grow the economy, bring back training centers. Those benefit every American. And I think that those are the kind of things that he's committed to, is figuring out how do we look at the educational piece to ensure that as people transfer out of one job to another, as technology evolves, that we prepare people who might have had a blue-collar job to transfer into a technology-based job. But there's a lot of things that we can do in terms of training and retraining, VOTEC, and other areas of our society that help people advance, whether their background or not. And that's the kind of stuff that I think will help move them up. Yes, sir.
Sean, the CBO came out with a report this morning that said if the current spending levels stay as they are, the government's going to spend about put the country in another $10 trillion of debt over the next 10 years. Does that reinforce for the president the need to cut spending? And if
Absolutely.
so, I mean, where in the government can he cut spending enough to make a dent on that?
Well, look, I think this is the American people elected the right guy at the right time. This is somebody who understands how to cut a good deal, how to negotiate a good deal, and how to manage a budget. You look at how he's managed himself and his projects under budget and either on time or ahead of time. That's the kind of philosophy that he's bringing into to this government and to this White House, is making sure that not only do we respect taxpayers and figure out whether or not we're talking about the hiring freeze or how we do business or how much money we send in aid, that we make sure that the money that we send is being used well, the programs that we're implementing are done in a way that are done in the most efficiently and effective ways. But it's a whole of government process. It's trying to make sure that, look at what he did with Boeing and Lockheed on the planes. It's going in and saying we can lower that price more, we can negotiate further. It's why when Steve asked about the 2 pipelines, that he wanted to make sure that he inserted pieces to say we can negotiate further. If we can get a better deal out of the American taxpayer, if someone's getting use of our lands or our waterways to build something that they're going to profit for it, can we find a way to ensure that the American taxpayer receives a benefit? That would go to the U.S. Treasury. And there's a lot of ways that he's going to continue to look at this, whether it's the money coming in or the money going out. How do we get a handle on this? But I think that we have the right guy at the helm of the country right now when it comes to ensuring that our tax dollars are spent well and our deficits addressed. One last piece, when it comes to energy exploration, it's not just about energy. It's not just about finding new ways to bring in energy to this country. It's about new ways of creating economic growth, looking at ways that our natural resources can not just benefit us to become more energy independent, but can to bring money into the Treasury to either reduce the deficit, create jobs or whatever. But there's a lot of ways and a lot of new thinking that's going on that he's empowered his team and his cabinet to look at to create jobs, to grow the economy, and to bring the deficit down. Yes, sir.
Two questions, and both, I know you love us, but if there are protests again, if this pipeline goes through, last time during the protests, there were independent journalists that were arrested and detained. Same question I asked the Obama administration. Would this administration at least support reporters in trying to do their job in gathering facts?
You guys know I'm a huge fan.
God love you. I like that on the record. And then number 2, new Congressman Jamie Raskin out of Maryland is proposing, said he will sponsor legislation for a national shield law. Your vice president in the past has supported a national shield law for reporters. Would this administration support a national shield law for reporters?
That's a great question. I know then Congressman Pence was a champion of that when he was in the House. I have not asked. It's a great question. I'd be glad to follow up with you on that. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Richard Latendresse, TVA Canada. On Keystone,
Yeah.
the initial process took up to 10 years.
Yeah.
How fast does the president want this?
As quick as possible. He's ordering, I mean, that's why this is done the day it was done. He wants to make sure that we get this process back on track and get it moving. It's too important for the jobs and economy of our country.
With Prime Minister Trudeau, did they talk about Keystone?
They talked about setting up an agenda that would include NAFTA. I'm sure that will come up at their conversation when they meet. The call that they had was more a congratulatory, setting up the meeting. I'm sure when they sit down and meet and the teams meet, that will definitely be on the agenda. Yes, sir.
Question, Sean. Very, very last promise.
Okay.
You know, there's a tradition. Very first trip outside the country is for the president, a new president, is Mexico, Canada.
Right.
Will this tradition be maintained?
We'll have further updates. I've announced we're excited to have Theresa May come this Friday. We've set up a meeting with both the Prime Minister of Canada, the President of Mexico. I mentioned yesterday Prime Minister Netanyahu is coming. We've got a lot of interest of people coming. Well, when we have an update on the President's first foreign trips, we'll let you know. Yes, sir. Okay, I'm sorry.
A couple follow-ups to yesterday. First, you said that the phone call between the leaders of Russia and the U.S. is not scheduled yet. Has it been scheduled?
Not that I'm aware of.
Secondly, you also were asked about the meal-to-meal cooperation in Syria and coordination, and you referred us to the Pentagon, which said there was no such coordination.
That's right.
Is there any new guidance to that?
No, I believe that the Pentagon has fully read that out and stand by. Come on, that was two.
No, my real question is my real question is a basic one. We know that the president. Those were easy. The president has been what I can only describe as viciously attacked for his attitude to Russia by his opponents here. He has withstood those attacks. So, but I'm from Russia. And, I speak for my audience. Please explain to us why. What's his logic? Why is he doing this? Why is he standing firm on wanting to improve? We are happy that he stands firm on that. But please explain to my audience his reasoning for believing that we can do it together.
Because I think he's a great deal maker, and he's going to do what he can to fight on behalf of this country. And if a deal can be found, whether it's fighting for American taxpayers or working with another country to protect our national security interests or economic interests, he's going to make a deal that's in the best interest of this country. Thank you. Yeah, Jeff.
You said the president believes that there was voter fraud. I wonder if you believe that. You were at the Republican National Committee at the time, and Chief of Staff Reince Priebus was the chairman of the RNC at the time. Do you believe there was widespread voter fraud?
My job is not. Look,
how can he be comfortable with his win if he believes
He's very
that there
comfortable
was
with his
3
win.
million votes? Maybe he didn't win.
No,
it.
he's very comfortable with his win. It's an electoral-based system. He got 306 electoral votes. 33 of 50 states voted for him. I think, look, Jeff, I've asked him to answer this question twice. He believes what he believes based on the information he's provided. Yes, ma'am.
What does that mean for democracy, though, Sean? What does that
Thanks,
mean?
Jeff.
If he
Ma'am.
does believe that, what does that mean for democracy?
It means
Sean?
that I've answered your question.
Have you?
Irish television. The president's been meeting with business leaders. Are there any plans to target U.S. multinationals that have significant operations abroad with more favorable tax regimes?
Well, I think a lot of these countries that you saw yesterday, and even our automotive industry has a lot of presence overseas, if that's what you mean. I mean, the first priority that he has is on U.S.-based companies that are trying to bring more jobs back or grow here. But most of these companies, I mean, Johnson & Johnson is clearly a multinational company, Dow. You go down the list of the individuals that he met with yesterday, and then you take the auto industry that was here today, Ford, Chrysler, GM. They all have massive overseas investments. And I think part of the problem that he was talking about is greater market access for them, the ability to get into markets that we might not want, that they may have trouble with. Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, a small follow-up. Are there any plans to still, has the President issued his official invitation to the Prime Minister of Ireland to come here for the traditional St. Patrick's Day celebration?
No, but I'm going to get on that right away. Thank you for bringing that up. That's on the list. Can we write that one down? Hold on, Blake.
So to piggyback off that, yesterday the president met
More
with,
Irish.
not up the Irish. Yesterday, the president met with CEOs, broad-based, met with union leaders,
Yeah.
broad-based. Today, though, he specifically met with auto
Right.
leaders. Why was that his choice as the first industry to meet with? And then taking it broader from that, what is the criteria or the policy that the president, the administration has or might develop that will determine which leaders are brought here to the White House to meet with the president?
Well, look, I appreciate the question. I think, again, I keep reminding, we're on day 2. We can only have so many meetings in a day. And I think when you look, just stop and remember what you just said for a second. Yesterday, union leaders, business leaders, bicameral group of folks, executive order action. I mean, his day 1 is pretty darn robust. I'm not going to try, I've gotten out of the quantifying game. But I think when you compare that to the past, I bet you we'd probably put that up there. The amount of action that he took and number of folks, that's what you're going to see a lot more of. Today, he wanted to sit down with the auto industry in particular because he thinks that's vital to our manufacturing base. But he's going to have a lot of meetings. And he's going to meet with a lot of folks from a lot of backgrounds who he thinks have an interest in working with him to enact an agenda that grows jobs in the economy. That's basically, to your point on the criteria, that's what it is. Yeah.
Does the president have any plans to change U.S. policy towards Cuba? There were a lot of changes that took place in the last administration. Any executive orders as it relates to U.S.-Cuba relations?
I have to follow up. We've got nothing that we're ready to announce at this point.
One more question, Sean, if I may.
Since I'm doing 2.
Yeah, that's right. Picking up on what April said, are there any plans in the near future for the president to meet with leaders of the Congressional Black Caucus or the Congressional Hispanic Caucus?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I think it might have even been April that asked this yesterday, but I think that the president started with the leadership, as he should. I mean, I think you start with them. Today, the group that he's meeting is part of the advice and consent role in the Constitution with respect to appointing a Supreme Court justice. So he's going through the motions of that, but you are going to see a lot of meetings with a lot of individuals. He welcomes the input, ideas, and advice that these people are coming in with about how to move in his agenda forward. This is something that he has really enjoyed, not just during the transition, but in the last few days of his administration, of hearing the feedback. And one of the things that's interesting about the meetings is, with the exception of the pool spray that opens them up, the president has largely just sat and listened, asked questions, tried to elicit their ideas about what barriers they're facing to hire more people, what the regulatory or tax impact is on their ability to create more jobs or to keep manufacturing here in the United States. You're going to see a lot more of that, and I think what he wants to do is further expand, whether it's governors or members of different groups within the House and the Senate, to come down here and get their advice and ideas on how to work together and move an agenda. Yeah.
Hi, Jonathan Lemire, Associated Press. You had mentioned that the president is commissioning a review of the Islamic State strategy. Can you just tell us who exactly is involved in that review? How long is it going to take? And what are some options being considered?
Well, I don't want to get too much in detail. I think obviously there's a lot of the key individuals, not to get back on my high horse here, but I think a lot of the individuals that are going to be part of that process, he's got some of his senior staff on that process now, but obviously a Secretary of State, a CIA director, a UN ambassador. There's a lot of folks that, have not been consulted yet because they haven't been confirmed. They have in private, but I think they need to get together, get confirmed, get in their respective departments, agencies, and be able to help get with their staff and provide feedback. Hallie Jackson.
Thanks, John. 2 topics for, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
First one, and really not to belabor a point here, but you said that the president has believed for a while that there is widespread voter fraud. But only 4 days ago did he get the power of the presidency to be able to do something about it. So why not definitively say that he will investigate if he believes, in the administration position, is that there was massive voter fraud?
Well, first of all, the comment that he made was, he said 3 to 5 million people, could have voted illegally, based on the studies that he's seen. But he's very clear that he won the election based on the 306 electoral votes that he got. We're here on day 2. I think let's not prejudge what we may or may not do in the future.
If he lost, would you be upset?
Of course he'd be upset. Who wouldn't be upset if they lost?
But he's not upset. I mean, about the vote.
No, but I mean, that's not how the election is held in our country, by electoral votes. He won overwhelmingly with 306 electoral votes, the most since any Republican since Reagan. He's very comfortable with the depth and breadth of the support that he got from the American people and the 33 states that voted for him, the 9 of 13 battleground states, the 2,600 counties. He's very, very pleased with that. Yeah.
Keystone, Sean, just one more on Keystone, the second topic, just quickly on the pipelines, if you don't mind, Sean. You did say
I know,
two
you're right,
topics.
I
Thank
get
you.
to get two.
On Keystone, when you look at the Dakota Access Pipeline as well, given the president's former business ties, his last financial disclosure showed that he did have some stake in Energy Transfer Partners.
He has
The
sold it.
CEO, he sold most of it, but there's still, at least from his last disclosure, still thousands of dollars that he has. Can you just reassure the American people that there were no
Thousands of dollars
conflicts?
for a guy who's a multi-billionaire isn't I don't think that's at the top. I don't know that that's true. No,
Sorry
I don't
about
know.
conflicts, what
But I
would you
mean, huh? Excuse me?
To those concerned about potential conflicts, what
Look,
would you
I
say?
think he has no conflicts. By law, he can't have conflicts. And I think the president has gone above and beyond, as was outlined at the press conference a couple weeks ago, his efforts to make sure that his focus is entirely on the American people and bringing back jobs and growing this economy. Yes?
The president recently said he thought NATO was obsolete. Does he share the view of Secretary of Defense James Mattis, who said yesterday Washington has, quote, an unshakable commitment to the alliance?
Well, I think I've addressed this before, that the president is very clear that as it's structured now in terms of the output of NATO, he doesn't feel as though it's doing what its mission was set up to do or that it's being particularly effective. I think that Secretary Mattis and others have some ideas about how to reform and make organizations like NATO more effective and benefit the amount of money that the United States is putting into, whether it's NATO or the UN or other organizations like that. But I think he's not pleased with what he sees in terms of the U.S. contribution and the output that's getting. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Sean. Legislation from Senators Collins, Senator Cassidy would repeal Obamacare but allow states that want to opt in to continue to have it. Would the president support that type of legislation? And if he did, would that go back on his promise to have a full repeal of the law?
Well, I think first and foremost, let's get back to what his goal is. I mean, we're working with Congress. Some of those conversations started last night. Staff has been working on a plan to repeal and replace. His goal, first and foremost, is to make sure that we give the American people a healthcare system that's affordable, more accessible, more doctors, more plans. That's what his goal is going to be, how a state chooses to implement that. But I think right now, the idea that we've had these mandates requiring people to get things that's driven out competition and driven up cost is not a healthcare system that he's pleased with and wants to support the repeal of. Kristen.
Sean, thank you. I just want to be clear about this investigation because it seems like you potentially opened the door for one. Have you discussed with the president the
Which
possibility
investigation are you referring to?
possibly investigating this voter fraud?
No, I didn't. I did not. No, I did not.
It's possible.
No, of course, anything's possible. I think at some point, look, I was asked a question. There is no investigation. I said it was possible. Anything is possible. It was a hypothetical question. My point to you is that to ask us on day two, he made a comment last night on something that he has believed and said for a long, long time. And the question that was asked to me is whether or not, so it's been asked and answered. I'm not.
Foreign policy.
I'm
Does
sure.
he support Israel has approved the settlement of 2,500?
I think that he has asked his team to get together. He will meet with Israel. Continues to be a huge ally of the United States. He wants to grow closer with Israel to make sure that it gets the full respect that it deserves in the Middle East. And what he's going to do is, as I mentioned yesterday, we're going to have a meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. We'll continue to discuss that.
Does he support the expansion of settlements?
Like I said, we'll have a conversation with the Prime Minister. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Jordan Fabian from The Hill. During the campaign, President Trump said he wanted to fill up the Guantanamo Bay prison with bad dudes. And I'm wondering if the White House is formulating a plan to do that. Has the President directed the armed forces to start arresting terrorists overseas and bring them to the prison?
We have nothing on that right now. Yeah. Yeah.
Sean, thanks. I have two questions related to the Supreme Court and today's meeting with Senate leadership. First, can you talk to us a little bit more about what the goal of the meeting is? It sounds like he's closing in on a decision. Will he be sharing with them a short list of his final choices?
I'm not going to. Yeah. But one quick correction. I mentioned two individuals at the beginning. The only attendees are Senator McConnell's, Schumer, Grassley, and Feinstein. I falsely mentioned the whips, and they're not going to be attending. That being said, look, the idea is to hear their input on what they want, how far he wants to extend himself on where he is on his thought process. But I think he wants to hear what they're looking for in a judge, maybe any ideas that they have. Yeah.
For that, Sean, when Senate Democrats changed the filibuster rules in 2013, they specifically exempted the Supreme Court nominations from that.
Right.
Would the president encourage Senate Republicans to consider lowering?
Well, I think that he's going to
filibuster?
appoint a quality associate justice that hopefully will achieve overwhelming support. So I think his goal is that he's going to choose someone who hopefully I think everybody recognizes is a jurist that's going to adhere to the Constitution and not legislate from the bench, and that should achieve bipartisan support.
Your frustration with the nomination process so far, is that something he would recommend to Republicans that they consider?
Look, I think we're early in this process. He's going to hear from them tonight. So I want to thank you all. I'll see you.